Hello friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Anurekha Chariwag, Assistant Professor at the Department of Sociology, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. Today we are going to discuss a module titled Mode of Production Debate in India. This module is part of the paper titled Agrarian Relations and Social Structure in India. This paper is coordinated by Dr. Manish Thakur of IIM Kolkata. So this paper and module on mode of production debate in India raises few issues. The first, in the Indian context with regard to agriculture, what is the kind of mode of production that we could observe? Further, there is also a discussion on semi-feudal mode of production. Further, there is also a discussion whether from semi-feudal we have gone into capitalist mode of production, and there is a large discussion on colonial mode of production. So all these debates lead to an understanding about how do we understand our structures in terms of agricultural production in India. For the students of agrarian structure in India, the mode of production debate in Indian agriculture has been of utmost importance given its theoretical sophistication and empirical rigor. Primarily, it was a debate carried forward by the scholars of Marxist persuasion. The debate started in the late 1960s and continued for more than a decade, mainly in the pages of influential journal Economic and Political Weekly. Scholars were mainly concerned with issues such as replacement of pre-capitalist mode, the nature of labor, free or unfree, and the progressive unfolding of capitalism in Indian agriculture. The mode of production debate in Indian agriculture is in a way an offshoot of the findings of the farm management studies conducted in the mid-1950s. Scholars such as Ashok Rudra, Utsav Patnaik, Paresh Chattopadhyay, Amit Bahaduri, Nirmal Chandra contributed to this debate. The mode of production debate in Indian agriculture has been one of the most engaging scholarly, albeit non-conclusive debates in Indian social sciences. In essence, the debate has been about the nature of transition in Indian agriculture from feudal mode of production to a capitalist mode of production. We can discern three sets of issues: identifying and circumscribing the capitalist mode of production in Indian agriculture, tracing the colonial roots of existing mode of production, and discussing Indian agriculture is essentially marked with colonial reminders, and lastly, the nature and character of the formation of agrarian classes and its implications. In this module, we'll try to summarize the main arguments put forth by some of the scholars. The Indian context. One of the important questions that has drawn the attention of the scholars of the agrarian question is the development of capitalism in agriculture. In India, the mode of production debate started with the question as to what development of capitalism in agriculture entailed. There were two approaches to this. First, it did not see any qualitative difference in the growth of capitalist relations of production between colonial and post-colonial independence India, except for varying speed of transition. According to this viewpoint, the growth of wage-paid labor as part of the process of commercialization of agriculture was exploitative by nature. The landlord-petty-tenant relationship was interpreted as a capitalist one, ignoring the difference between profit and rent. After independence also, the same trends continued but at a much faster rate. The second approach stressed a definite qualitative difference between the colonial and post-independence process of growth of capitalist production and agriculture. The colonial setup was a revenue-cum-rent exploiting in nature, which led to pauperization of peasants rather than proletarianization. Post-independence, even though agrarian structure carried this legacy in form of underemployment and unemployment, the new economic environment initiated a new phase of agrarian accumulation. Further accepting the distinctiveness of the colonial experience and rejecting the viewpoint that growth of capitalism in India is merely a homologous transformation of what applied to the sovereign industrializing countries in the West, the solution was sought by extending the concept of colonial mode of production. But this was soon realized to be it was difficult to identify any specifically colonial social existence form of labor power. Doing such an analysis would mean considering as many mode of production as there were historically. Hence, the debate would have to be located in the post-independence time horizon, but keeping in view the specific macroeconomic processes of the entailed in India due to colonial legacy. Post-independence agricultural sector was subjected to a great amount of empirical investigation. The studies in economics of farm management conducted by the Ministry of Food and Agriculture 1950s is significant as it brings about the inverse relationship between farm size and productivity. It was shown that there exists decreasing return to scale. The reason for this anomaly is given by Amartya Sen lies in the advantage gained by the involvement of family members in small farms as compared to large farms. In large farms, generally wage labor is employed and who not work at rate would below their marginal productivity. In case of small farms, it is feasible to be managed by family members and they would work even at a wage rate below marginal productivity. Hence, the cost of labor reduces. The labor per acre increased as the size of farm became smaller. This meant that productivity when measured in terms of production per acre of land would be more in the case of small farms as compared to large farms. In 1968, Ashok Rudra, while opposing Sen's view, argued that this result cannot be generalized across all regions as there are other reasons for better productivity of small farms. This could be better quality of smaller farm holdings or that all family members were engaged because of absence of any other employment opportunity. In a joint paper in 1980, Rudra and Sen pointed out that since there is no clear evidence of inverse relationship between farm size and productivity, there should not be any concluding idea regarding peasant or capitalist form of farming. There should be rather a balanced approach including the advantages of both like cooperative form of farming. Since the mid-1960s, the mode of production debate has two perspectives. One wherein scholars like Ashok Rudra, Utsa Patnaik, Paresh Chattopadhyay et al. Have raised questions on whether at all Indian agriculture exhibits any capitalist tendency. The other is wherein Amit Bahaduri and Nirmal Chandra et al. Bring out strong semi-feudalist production relations in the agrarian structure. In India, the rapid technological innovations and mechanization adopted as part of the Green Revolution created a divide in the social system. A group of farmers, mostly rich ones, were able to reap the benefits of Green Revolution technologies, whereas the small and marginal farmers could not. This increased the disparity in incomes among farmers. Green Revolution is an example of the technological advantage which was limited to few big farmers. Green Revolution did impact the agriculture sector but differentially. Thanagre argues that accessibility of Green Revolution technology was constrained in the hands of few large farmers who could afford it. As a consequence, the prosperity unleashed by the Green Revolution was distributed differentially to different categories of farmers, putting the small and marginal farmers at a relative disadvantage. Any technological upgradation requires a considerable amount of capital. Only big farmers can afford such luxury of buying expensive machines and technologies. Also, there is a vested interest of capitalists to bring agriculture in their arena. They use technology as a vehicle to introduce capitalism in agriculture. There have been many instances of contract farming which essentially promote capitalist growth in agriculture. Mode of production question thus emerged in India in this context of rapid technological and social change associated with the Green Revolution and the incipient threat of a Red Revolution. These changes were bringing agriculture into the folds of capitalism and resulted in a shift in alignment of the class system. Prior to Green Revolution, it can be said that essentially non-capitalist relations existed. However, with revolution came the precursors of pre-capitalist mode of production in agriculture, semi-feudal mode of production. Another point of contention with reference to Indian agriculture is whether it has semi-feudalist characteristics. It was argued by Amit Bahaduri based on a study conducted by him in some villages in West Bengal that rather than capitalist transition taking place in agriculture, it is more of semi-feudalism that is prevalent. The main features of Indian agriculture that has led him to draw this conclusion are sharecropping, continued indebtedness of peasants, presence of two modes of exploitation, usury and land ownership by the same economic class, and lack of accessibility to the market for small tenant farmers. He argued that landowning class in lieu of land lease to peasants demand a share of the net harvest. Around 40 to 50% of the peasants in this sample lived under such condition. In the absence of capital for purchasing inputs, these peasants are generally in need of credit. Landowners play to the dual role of money lenders in the informal credit market. In the absence of any other formal credit market, peasants have no other option but to pay the high rate of interest. A large share of the harvest therefore goes away to pay back the credit and the peasant is left with a share of the harvest. In this process, the serfdom is created and only exacerbates the conditions of inequality over a period of time. This is described as interlocking of two-factor markets, credit market and labor market. Such exploitation hampers generation of capital in the agriculture and hence limits productivity. Bahaduri argues that it is because of these conditions that capitalist transition in agriculture is not happening. He mentions that transition can happen only if wage labor increases or through peasant revolt. Nirmal Chandra, as mentioned in Alice Thorner, verified these findings. The feudal and sometimes semi-feudal structure of Indian agriculture prevents the development of a capitalist system in agriculture. Brass argues that the shift towards casual labor has been engineered by capitalist farmers who continue to maintain or even tighten control over these laborers through mechanism of debt and find it comparatively cheaper. Amit Bahaduri posits that capital investment in agriculture in India are minimal. Bahaduri, in his study in West Bengal, made a mathematical assertion that recovering his cost of production, the peasant is left with capital which is below his consumption requirement. To maintain consumption, the farmer is forced to borrow and this perpetuates the usury business. Further, a farmer running short of consumption money cannot be expected to have surplus to reinvest, a fundamental feature of capitalist mode of production. To keep the farmer perpetually indebted to the owner or the money lender is an essential feature of feudalism. Since semi-feudal landowner derives his income from property rights and usury, he will be discouraged to introduce technological improvement as this will increase farm productivity and the agrarian labor may cease to be indebted. Bearing pure economic consideration in mind, it may be profitable for landowner to improvise and mechanize agriculture. But the social and political context is also important and land is a source of power and domination in India. Thus, in a way, the powerful are restraining the improvisation of agriculture in order to withhold the domination in the semi-feudal Indian agricultural system. As discussed by Adhikari Pradhan Prasad makes similar observation for Bihar. He states that perpetual indebtedness of tenants, landowners and usury lies with the same set of economic and social sectors. Landowners purposely refuse technological innovation and mechanization to perpetuate bondage of semi-feudal system. It can be concluded that feudal or semi-feudal mode of production ceases to remain feudal or semi-feudal once it gets embedded in capitalist system. The external capitalist system of production is so overwhelming the semi-feudal system so loses its nature. When integrated into capital, feudal modes are no longer feudal. So semi-feudal modes of surplus product extraction through the institution of tenant cultivation and sharecropping have declined over time. Additionally, the semi-feudal position, marked with the dominance of landlords in agrarian production relations, hampered the development of capitalist class relations and constituted a substantial obstacle to growth. Utsa Patnaik opinions that agricultural laborers are not free. They are similar to bonded laborers. She pegs her arguments on two broad features. She states that there is a lack of productive reinvestment of surplus and accumulation of capital. There is a small but gradually expanding class of capitalists within the pre-capitalist agriculture sector. The relationship between landowner and the tenant is more personal than economic. Traditional moneylenders still thrive in a large proportion in rural India. Patnaik argues that Indian agriculture is characterized by limited and distorted development of capitalism, which has not revolutionized the mode of production. Lodge argue that unfreedom itself is a matter of degree under capitalism. This begins with a generalized form of commodity production and expansion for the market for the goods thus produced. Brayman has described this neo-bondage in detail. He asserts that rural economy has an inherent bondage system existing in the social structure. The incidence of debt bondage is widespread in the informal sector economy, particularly among female migrant workers equipped with social identity which makes them vulnerable to exploitation and discrimination from the better endowed caste and classes. Capitalist mode of production. In the mid-1960s, Ashok Rudra with A. Majid and B. D. Talib conducted a survey of big farmers with size of land holding above 20 acres in Punjab. As per this study, with a decrease in farm size, the intensity of cropping decreases. Also, per acre receipt of income and expenditure increased sharply beyond a threshold of 75 acres. Even the use of capital in equipment and value of output per acre cultivates went up after crossing this mark. To imply the extent of capitalist tendency in the mode of production in agriculture, it was suggested to observe the following features in a cyclical manner. Percentage of land rented out to total land owned, wage payment in cash per acre of farm size, value of modern capital equipment per acre of farm size, percentage of produce sold in the market to total produce, and rate of profit per acre for comparison between capitalist and non-capitalist farmer. It was suggested that in the case of a tendency of capitalist mode of production, there should be positive correlation between 10 pairs of variables listed above. The data did not show any positive correlation between any of the pairs. It was therefore concluded in the study that there is no visible transition towards capitalist mode of production in Indian agriculture. This study was critiqued by R. S. Rao. He argued that a cross-sectional approach to understand the development of capitalism would not be sufficient. He challenged the required condition of a strong association between variables by saying that in a cross-sectional study dealing with micro units in a sector like agriculture which lags behind an industry is always anyways a strong association between variables may not be necessary to prove the existence of capitalism. The transition may be in its initial phase and the expected features may not be exhibited. It is highly probable that a large farm is using a mix of both older as well as modern farming equipment at the same time. In such a situation, a time series data instead of a cross-sectional analysis as done by Rudra would be more relevant in bringing out a trend in change in the capitalist characteristics. The choice of variables in Rudra's was also questioned by Rao. In Rudra's study, wage payment calculation was considered only in cash. However, wage payment may also be in kind, which is not an indication against capitalist transition. The variable profit per acre is also doubtful. This only measures the efficiency of the farm rather than whether the mode of production is capitalist or not. Capitalism is farming as defined by Rao is use of hired labor and use of substantial amount on part of the surplus for deepening or widening of business. Only a time series analysis would be able to disclosure of what is becoming than what is. He suggested that indicator like increases in capital over a period of time or proportion of surplus spent on asset formation to reveal better capitalist features. In the next series of study by Utsa Patnaik in early 70s, the historical process of transition of agricultural production in India is discussed. In colonized India, the capitalism process was similar to the one which existed in Europe. This involved creation of a large pool of pauperized proletariat class of agricultural laborers. Land and labor market was also created, but still an important aspect of capitalism was missing: creation of surplus and reinvestment of the same to expand production in a continued manner. In post-independence period, however, due to an emphasis by the state on the growth of agriculture, surplus from agriculture production began to flow back into agriculture. It is hence implied that transition in agriculture is a capitalist one. In November 1971, Rudra challenged her conclusive remarks on Indian agriculture by seeking more clarification on methods applied by her to calculate surplus value of profit. He also brings out fallacies in the way she calculates the rate of profit without considering fixed capital, which is difficult to measure in case of agriculture. To this, there was a sharp reply from Patnaik in December 71 based on the survey she conducted. It was done by selecting large farmers based on purposive sampling method across 10 different districts in 5 states. Her argument was similar to that of Rao, saying that different modes of production could coexist in the transitional stage. In this situation of intermingling, Rudra's negative finding does not say anything about the beginning of the process of capitalism in agriculture. It is only confirmed that capitalist mode of production is currently absent. It was proposed by Patnaik that instead of finding out correlations between pairs of variables considered in Rudra's study, the focus should be on finding whether the value for a particular farmland was higher average in case of each of the variables or not. But Rudra later refuted this also. She proposed 2 more criteria to understand the development of capitalism in Indian agriculture: ratio of modern capital equipment and wage payment, and ratio between output and wage payment. She also critiqued Rudra on the basis of demarcation of class according to Marxist theory. Rudra was of the opinion that there should be discontinuity between 3 classes of peasants: poor, middle class farmers and capitalist farmers, but Patnaik pointed out that this is right to find such discontinuities in reality. According to her, the data points are more likely to be continuous because of the overlapping features of one class with another. The existence of the 3 classes, however, will be clear. In 1972, Paresh Chattopadhyay critiqued the arguments of Sen V. M. Dandekar and C. H. Hanmanta Rao. Dandekar had argued that because of overpopulation and surplus labor force in agriculture, wage rate of labor is bound to fall. It may also go below the market wage rate. Hence, family-based farming would be more profitable as compared to farms using capitalist mode of production. Rao also supported this argument. He also supported the landlord-tenant system and totally dismissed the principal-agent problem that may exist in the system. He suggested that a long-term contract involving input-sharing mechanism or a tenure policy would make the system efficient. According to Chattopadhyay, in Marxist literature, peasant agriculture based on family labor can be further categorized as natural economy and commodity economy. The condition wherein farmers with small land holdings almost consume the entire produce as natural economy. They do not sell their produce to make a living. Even though in such a mode of production there is minimum exploitation, it cannot be seen as a permanent solution. In the commodity economy setup, farmer sells its produce in the market and is able to make a profit. This cannot still be called as capitalist, as this profit is used for meeting living needs and not be invested back in the business. Also, the price may not be equal to the marginal cost of labor. There are chances the price in this case would be less than that in the capitalist production. A consumer surplus instead of producer would be created in this one. Thus, in spite of higher productivity, the profit is not significant. Exploitation of labor happens in this manner under such a setup. Chattopadhyay also critiques the study done by Rudra, arguing that there was a fallacy in the process of identification of capitalist farmers. He says that it is a production relation that determines whether a production system is capitalist in nature or not, and not the instruments used. Even in situations where there is no involvement of modern equipment, the production relation can be capitalist. Similar manner, land relation under capitalist farming need not necessarily be the only owner cultivation, which was suggested as necessary condition by Rudra. Tenant cultivation, capitalist is also a tenant, is also permissible if the use of wage labor is done. Such a setup is a classic case of capitalist ground rent as discussed by Mark. Then, in responding to arguments of Utsa Patnaik made by critiquing Rudra, Chattopadhyay goes back to Marx's theory of capitalist accommodation. He counters the reason given by Patnaik for the non-capitalist nature of Indian agriculture pre-independence by saying that increase in the proletariat along with capitalist development is inevitable. Patnaik argued that before independence, the nature of Indian agriculture was not capitalist because the surplus of agriculture sector was not absorbed by a parallel industrial sector. He argued that in the end, in the 19th century, there was an increase in commodity character in agriculture. He also substantiates his point by putting forward statistics towards the end of the British rule, when around 35% of the agriculture produce was sold in the market, and production in the non-food grain category showed an increasing trend in the first quarter of the 20th century. Patnaik bordered Andre Gundre Frank when she was replying to Chattopadhyay's argument. She found the alternative proposed by PC regarding generalized commodity production as an indication of capitalist mode of production similar to Frank's type position. He, that is Andre Gundre Frank, also argued that all countries dominated by imperialism entered into a network of world capitalist exchange relations. Therefore, all these countries were capitalist. It is an argument worth rejecting if the process of accumulation and reproduction is confined to individual farms. It made no sense to reject the presence of capitalism just because surplus of Indian agriculture sector was going to the bourgeois in Britain. Patnaik said that she found the basic premise on which such statements are made to be incorrect. He questioned Patnaik by saying that would individual farms not be capitalist if the surplus is siphoned off to the foreign country. While discussing Punjab, Ashok Rudra states that the emergent trends in agriculture are converging towards capitalist mode of production. He suggests 5 main features of capitalist production. The capitalist tends to cultivate his land himself rather than give out on lease. Tends to use hired labor in such great proportion than family labor. 3. Tends to use farm machinery. 4. Delivers to market an important share of his produce. And 5. So organizes the production as to yield high rate of return on his investment. Alvi defines capitalists as those who undertake cultivation mainly with the use of hired labor and investment of capitalism. They rely on wage labor for at least 50% of their requirements, and they produce essentially for profit, and the bulk of their output is destined for the market. Post-1970s Indian agrarian economy has undergone fundamental shifts in the economic and social relationships between different classes. The rural, the urban, agriculture and industry, and within agriculture itself. Along with this, there has been a shift in the political philosophy also, and it has shifted from a national state-led development policy towards a neoliberal form of economic regulation and has become integrated into the global economy. Integration into the global economy necessitates encapsulation of the domestic agrarian system into the folds of capitalism, be it feudal or semi-feudal. Indian agrarian policies and institutional interventions were built to enable the necessary market surplus for the capitalist sector, which will ensure some basic viability for the farmer and productivity growth for the sector. Besides being landless, agrarian labor lacked any form of assets. In case such landless laborers needed money, they could not have anything besides their own labor to mortgage. Marriage, sickness, drought, death, and certain other such contingencies coerced the laborers to enter into a vicious cycle of perpetual indebtedness. Capitalization and privatization worsened the conditions of the agrarian labours. Colonial mode of production. India has a colonial history and its structures are still not free from ties of imperialism. Hamza Alvi insists that the structure of Indian agriculture should be studied in the colonial context. He vehemently opposes the idea of coexistence of mode of production. He proposes colonial mode of production as a unifying concept. According to him, the prevailing mode of production derives its origins and structures from colonization. production. Imperialism has its own set of demands, and agrarian economy catered to this demand. Contemporary changes in Indian agrarian economy and the issues in the debate must be looked at in the context of demands made by imperialism, social development since independence, and the successive policies that were instituted to realize the objectives for those purposes, and the dilemmas and contradictions underlying such policies. Over a period of time, the pattern became so entrenched that we see its relics still present in the agrarian economy. Daniel Thorner quotes Rudra's views and states that a single class and also a hybrid class, part feudal, part capitalist, is seen in India. Post-independence state institutions have purposely continued the existence of class-based divisions. However, policies like land reforms and integrated rural development program have contributed significantly towards transforming the agricultural sector. Thus, as present changes in agriculture has a distinct colonial legacy, it can be better understood as a colonial mode of production. Cleaver largely agrees with Alvi in reiterating that the different local structures must be grasped with an imperial capital which disarticulates the internal economy of the colony and integrates the internally disarticulated segments of the colonial economy externally into the metropolitan economy. Colonialism transforms the social relations around which mode of production is organized. Its form may or may not change, but its meaning surely changes. Semi-feudal relations of agriculture and mode of production as discussed by Bahaduri may be semi-feudal in nature, but the meanings are different when seen in the colonial context. For that matter, colonial history changes the meaning of social relations of semi-feudal. This faces the capitalist mode of production in the external world. It is not similar to other semi-feudal systems which do not have a colonial history. Semi-feudal relationships get absorbed in the larger context of expanding capitalism, but the basic genesis is in colonization. For India, which has a colonial history, there is a generalized commodity production as it is seen in the capitalist mode of production. However, the expansion of this production is distinct from capitalist mode of expansion. One of the most important prominent features of this type of capitalist yet not so capitalist expansion is the drainage of surplus. The surplus gets drained to the center, which is mostly the first world. Trade with other countries which are on the same pedestal or have a colonial history is limited. Trade relations are primarily with ex-colonizers. This is where the concept of unfree labor as discussed by Utsav Patnaik comes in. The presence of limited capitalist development is coupled with unfree labor. This unfree labor is an essential characteristic of colonization like bonded labor. The labor is free to move, but this freedom is more of an economic freedom than the social freedom. Theoretically, the labor can go anywhere it wants, but practically it has nowhere to go. The colonial powers ensured that property relations and taxations were designed in such a way that it restricted the movement of labor. The destruction of non-agricultural production like weaving and handicrafts along with technological innovation and mechanization in agriculture further accentuates the dilemma of labor. The problem has been accentuated by Green Revolution which further displaced the sharecroppers and smallholders. In this module, while trying to discuss the mode of production debate, the scholars have tried to understand the Indian agriculture, especially in terms of whether it exhibits limited capitalist development. Some scholars believe that the capitalist class emerges which is there, and that is contested by some of the scholars. So, what are the important areas that we can see within agrarian structure within India? The first is generalized commodity production, second the emergence of free labor, third the capital, fourth irrelevance in terms of sharecropping, fifth in terms of tenancy rights, and the important issues in terms of agricultural labor. But in terms of debate of the mode of production, it is still a highly debatable issue. Thank you.